Sounds like the administration is indeed getting involved with the auto workers strike.
Yep, that's what we have now. It's become a political fight. It's really become a competition of who can get the working class voter.
Wall Street didn't build the country. The middle class built the country. Unions built the middle class. That's a fact. So let's keep going. You deserve what you've earned, and you've earned a hell of a lot more than you're getting paid now.
For Japanese car makers, U.S. is by far the most important market.
In my short time with the car, and we and I drove it together, I thought it was totally adequate. So this is the front-wheel drive version of the car, around 240 horsepower-ish, almost 300 miles of range. I thought it looked good on the outside. Didn't strike me as anything too crazy, but
it turns out no one ships more EVs produced in China to Europe than Tesla.
All that and more. So let's get to it.
All right, we got a lot of stories to keep track of here, from the inflation discussion, and also, of course, that goes into the labor discussion. Renita Young, what's the latest here? It sounds like the administration is indeed getting involved with the auto workers strike.
Yep, that's what we have now. It's become a political fight. It's really become a competition of who can get the working class voter, whether or not the president or the former president wants to admit it. So the president is expected to walk picket lines today in Michigan, and this is significant because it's the strongest ever show of union solidarity with a sitting president. And he said through White House press secretaries that it's not a response to Donald Trump planning to visit tomorrow, and the White House says he wants to do this on his own volition, but it's been a fact that he's been facing consistently low polling numbers on his handling of economic issues, and then we have the looming threat of a government shutdown, right? And also the political pressure has been rising for him to show public support of this, since he has been a pro-union president. The UAW endorsed him in 2020 and has traditionally been a Democratic-leaning organization. Former President Donald Trump, on the other hand, he's planning to skip the second GOP debate so that he could be in Detroit tomorrow, or in Michigan, may not be in the city of Detroit. But he's speaking to UAW strikers. It's no sign that this strike will stop anytime soon. We know it's spread to 38 more locations in 20 more states since it started. This is mainly targeting GM and Stellantis, but it's some interesting news happening with Ford today.
Yeah, tell us about that, because again, there's like multiple angles to every story that we're following right now. Now, this one has kind of gotten the, I don't know if it's nuance or complication of both candidates involved, but there's also literal, production effects that are already happening from an economic standpoint.
Already happening. And so Ford decided to pause construction of an EV manufacturing facility. It would have been worth about $3.5 million in Michigan. The company said that it's concerned that the factory might not be able to produce products at price points that are competitive for the company. They say they need to rein in some of their spending, and they've also caught criticism because they're using batteries. They have plans to make batteries that use the technology of a Chinese company as well. Some lawmakers, though, have said these strikes could have been impacting the company's decision to halt production of this facility. And even UAW President Shawn Fain responded to that. He says that this is a shameful, barely veiled threat to cut jobs from Ford at a plant that doesn't even exist yet. And the factory, it was supposed to start making batteries in 2026. It was supposed to employ about 2,500 workers and crank out enough batteries to supply 400,000 vehicles a year. That would have been a boon to the economy there. It would have been tons of jobs. And now lawmakers and UAW President Shawn Fain feels like it's gotten caught up in the mess of the strikes.
Something's got to give. UAW workers unsatisfied, and rightfully so. While the majority of the UAW workers are living paycheck to paycheck, or so they would have you think, they're very nearsighted when it comes to what they want to see. But Ford, GM, Stellantis, they can't afford to be nearsighted. They have to think long term. That short-term thinking is what's gotten them in this predicament in the first place. Chasing those internal combustion engine profits instead of investing heavily in the battery electric vehicle back in 2012, when Tesla proved you could have a better, pure, battery electric vehicle, so much so that it wins Motor Trend Car of the Year. Now, you're being held hostage by your workers at the most inopportune time, with the company's livelihood in the balance.
You guys, the UAW, you saved the automobile industry back in 2008 and before. Made a lot of sacrifices, gave up a lot, and the companies were in trouble. But now they're doing incredibly well. And guess what? You should be doing incredibly well too.
Ooh, incredibly well. They're making money, I give it that, but I wouldn't say they're doing incredibly well. I suppose it's a matter of perspective.
Wall Street didn't build the country, the middle class built the country. And unions built the middle class. That's a fact. So let's keep going. You deserve what you've earned, and you've earned a hell of a lot more than you're getting paid now.
Now that I can agree with.
Is this a major net positive for these Japanese car makers then?
Good morning, Sherry. Yes, there's growing perception here that the industrial action in Detroit is likely to benefit Japanese car makers. Nobody really knows how long it will take to end this negotiation, but some analysts look at the example of 2019 when workers at General Motors spent 40 days in their strike. And one thing to keep in mind here, political climate is a little bit different from the last time. President Joe Biden just visited Michigan, and that will be followed by the visit by former President Donald Trump later today. And that underscores not only the importance of the state of Michigan in the election cycle, but also it shows the political atmosphere of the U.S. In the U.S. Ahead of the election year. And so basically people think that the labor unions is in a very good position in terms of negotiation, and that points to the possibility that the talk could last much longer than some investors expect. Investors think that this is clearly something to keep an eye on in coming weeks.
What about the other non-US car makers, Korean car makers and German car makers?
Yeah, so they are also likely to benefit, but if you look at numbers, Japanese car makers are by far the largest sort of foreign car makers in the U.S. They have a market share of about a third. That's more than, in terms of a unit, and that's double, more than double the numbers for Korean and German car makers. And also, the flip side of this coin is that the for Japanese car makers, U.S. is by far the most important market. For instance, for Subaru, Subaru's receive 3/4 of its revenue from the U.S., and for Honda and Nissan, it's more than half. So,
Damn, that's a lot of cheddar. Or is it American? I don't know, but that's a lot of cheese.
what happens in the U.S. market is critically important for Japanese companies, and therefore they are likely to be affected the most by what's going on at the U.S. Big Three.
Hence why Japan is trying to accelerate their push for battery electric vehicles. The Japanese automakers see this as an opportunity to swoop in. While the Detroit Three are dealing with this unforeseen crisis, they're distracted, and Japanese automakers plan to seize the opportunity.
Nissan unveiled its first fully electric vehicle since the popular Leaf earlier this year. Meet the Nissan Ariya, the company's first fully electric crossover SUV. With a starting price of $43,190, does Nissan's latest foray give it a leg up in the EV race? Yahoo Finance's Pras Subramanian and Rick Newman are standing by with their review. Looking forward to this. It looked a little bit like a Nissan Rogue, though.
Yeah, a little bit like that. We'll get into that external kind of design there. You know, Nissan sort of delaying this Ariya for a year because of the supply chain pandemic crisis, the parts crisis, but now it's here. Rick and I had the chance to drive it. So Rick, I wanted to kind of ask you about, you know, exterior-wise, have we kind of gone past the super futuristic spaceship look and gone to more regular-looking EVs here?
Yeah, I mean, so I think Rochelle got it right, and that's what Nissan wants Rochelle to say, is it does look like models that are in their existing lineup. There's nothing odd or weird about these EVs. And look, you and I like EVs. I mean, we've driven a bunch of them. We like the way they drive. We like one-pedal driving. We like the torque. I mean, they're generally designed well. I think it's no longer a question of, are they good cars to drive. The question is, are they sellable? Are they marketable in the right way? And do they have the right features and, crucially, the right price to get people to buy them? And I think we have some doubts about the, how do you say the name again?
Aria.
Aria. I mean, I know how to say it, but I struggle over that name.
But to his point, it is price. When you're talking about mass adoption, Nissan wants to get the mass appeal. They want the battery electric vehicle to have the same feel as an internal combustion engine aesthetically. And inside, all the buttons and widgets. Something tells me the Nissan Aria doesn't have a similar functionality as the Model Y.
That it's such a wispy name, it just like evaporates in the air. I don't really get the name.
Yeah, I agree. The name's a little bit clunky there, a little bit awkward. In my short time with the car, and we and I drove it together, I thought it was totally adequate. So this is the front-wheel drive version of the car, around 240 horsepower-ish, almost 300 miles of range. I thought it looked good on the outside. It didn't strike me as anything too crazy, but I thought it drove comfortably. Very smooth, very quiet, a nice, luxurious interior for a Nissan, in my opinion, very upscale. And I think they did a great job, but I think, Rick, what we're talking about here is the cost.
With the price to match.
$53,000 as tested. It starts at $43,000. You're not going to get the $43,000 car. $53,000, no EV tax credit. What do you think about that?
I mean, this is a huge problem. So this car starts at a $7,500 price disadvantage, and this is complicated for everybody. Cars have to have a certain percentage of U.S. content to qualify for those tax credits. That includes leases. And this one doesn't. It's made in Japan, and Nissan began designing this before that law ever passed, so they're stuck with it.
Doesn't qualify for the IRA tax credit. For those of you that really don't think the IRA works, prime example, this thing's assembled in Japan, does not qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. The UAW strike isn't doing the 313 area code any favors.
I did notice one cool thing when I was looking at the website. In New York, which is where we are and where I live, you don't have to get an emissions certificate every year, which you pay for, or else you get a $65 ticket for it. So that's one good thing about EVs, but that will not go far toward offsetting the loss of that $7,500.
I will say the Aria had a nice sort of that floating sort of design with the console that kind of goes back and forth. Pretty cool little party trick there, but not enough to sort of compensate for that $7,500 loss because of that EV tax credit. Akiko, I know that you are an EV owner. I know you have a competing EV that I think might actually be better, but unfortunately comes with some baggage. What do you think about this car? What do you think about EV ownership in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's the infrastructure, right? In fact, I just saw that Electrify America, and it's so frustrating to have to look for a charger. That's the bigger concern. But, I'd be curious to watch the two of you in that car sort of talk about it, because, as you know, I mean, Japanese car makers have not been at the forefront of this EV race. In Nissan, they were kind of ahead in the beginning with the Leaf, but they've sort of fallen behind.
You can guarantee Japan won't stay out of the EV race, especially here in America, for much longer.
If you recall, just last week we were talking about this EU investigation into subsidies for China EVs. The EU conceivably trying to protect some of their own automakers that are pushing and producing EVs that are generally perhaps a little bit more expensive than some of the ones coming out of China. But it turns out no one ships more EVs produced in China to Europe than Tesla.
What? You really can't blame the EU for trying to protect its automakers. I mean, here in America, we're doing something quite similar with the IRA and expect the United States to double down with tariffs for particular car companies. Chinese EV makers, excuse me. Unfortunately for the EU, they seem to be a day late and a dollar short, as the impact of Chinese-made electric vehicles is going to happen their legacy automakers.
Early investigations suggest that Tesla has, in fact, benefited from those subsidies. The aim of the EU investigation will be to determine whether and the degree to which China has subsidized Tesla and some of those domestic manufacturers. Now, Tesla started exporting Model 3 sedans built at its Shanghai factory in late 2020. As of this year so far, they've exported nearly 94,000 made-in-China vehicles to Europe. The next largest amount is, and that's 47% of the deliveries from China. The next largest is closer to 58,000.
Damn! Now, this is all Model 3. Of course, Berlin is building all the Model Ys the EU could possibly ever need. It'll be worth keeping an eye out on how many Model 3s are actually flooding the EU.
represents about 5% of Elon Musk's whisper number target for the end of this year of maybe 2 million vehicles to be produced and delivered, a little bit above the official number. On the year, the stock well off of its highs, nonetheless, still up 97%. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not this story weighs on the stock as time goes on.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating because, of course, those cars are assembled in China and then exported out. But all cars have a ton of parts that are made in China. They're just assembled elsewhere. So I guess it depends on how important you think the actual assembly process is.
It's as important as we want it to be. A desperate battle to keep those European automakers relevant when it comes to price, because that's what'll be the kicker for mass adoption. In conclusion, Ford claims that they're going to have difficulty building that battery plant, which will provide thousands of jobs for that area. Is it because of the strike? Joe Biden offers some encouragement to the picket line workers. Donald Trump to show his face a little bit later. The Japanese see this as a grand opportunity to establish an EV foothold in the United States. And the EU's probe into subsidies is probably going to fall flat on its face. But hey, you gotta try to help the home team compete with these foreign automakers, Tesla included. That's all I got for you today. Be easy.